There's not much shelter around here. I suppose these runes will have to work. As adorable as your worry is, there's no need to apologize to me, traveler. I wouldn't think you have anything to apologize for. After all, it's not as though you made it start raining by your own abilities. And I'm not particularly bothered by it. In the grand scheme of things, one could consider this an unexpected interlude to our sightseeing trip. Merely a small interruption, one might call it. You want to leave before the storm gets any worse? I must say, I would rather we stay here. Though the weather around Sedai Island and its surrounding seas is always volatile, it will most likely clear up sooner than you expect. And I don't believe we have any pressing obligations. I won't have to return to the shrine for any business until tomorrow. I'd much prefer waiting here and staying out of the rain, rather than getting drenched with rainwater if we were to spend more than a few minutes without any cover. No, I thought after everything we've been through with A, you would be a tad bit more trusting of me. But you are just as wary as always. Could your change in mood be because we're alone here? I have no intention to bring you any harm. I promise, you're perfectly safe here, even more so in my company. In fact, I can assure you that the safest location on this island at any one time is by my side. I risk much more to guarantee your safety. I don't have any true reason to turn against you now. And, if I were being quite honest, I've taken a liking to you, dear Outlander. Why else would I prefer to stay here? And do you truly expect ulterior motives for all of my actions? Well, you wouldn't be the furthest from the truth, in that regard. There is a reason I would like to wait out the storm, but I assure you, it is much more of an innocuous reason than what you likely suspect. If I were to answer honestly, I dislike getting my ears wet. If at all possible, I would prefer to spend the least amount of time in the rain as I can. In comparison, I don't think there's much harm in waiting for the weather to clear. Thank you for your consideration, traveler. Then, we can stay here for the time being. Yes, the feeling of my fur getting so clumped and matted. It is, for lack of a better term, positively dreadful. If I had to describe the sensation, the closest comparison I can make is that having wet ears is akin to bathing yourself and walking outside during winter before drying your hair. It is unpleasant. Oh, the little General Goto. I see. He's described the feeling in a similar way. I'm not all that surprised. I know very few people like Goto or myself, and I know even fewer of us that do not absolutely dread getting our ears wet. Speaking of the little general, I never did get to teach him how to properly care for his fur. I got the impression he was always too shy to talk about his self-care routines, but it really would help if he just learned a few basic techniques. As for why I've been so insistent on teaching him, those of her kind are very rare. Although we're not exactly the same in what species we're a part of, I can't help but feel a protective urge around him. I do want to help make his life easier. Now, if only he were more receptive to my guidance. Ah, you'd like to hear? You really would be willing to receive my lessons on his behalf? Oh, that is quite honorable. Even adorable, if I could call it that. I can give you the best of my advice, under one condition. The next time you meet up with the little general, I'd like you to give his ears and tail a nice, thorough grooming session. And I would like you to show me the pictures of your work afterwards. I saw that you have one of those cameras from Fontaine, yes? A marvelous invention. I would say it's about time we had a device that could capture images in such a convenient way. The Tri-Commission is always so wary of foreign technology. It's quite bothersome, to say the least. But anyways, I expect you to do your best work for General Goto. and I expect to look over it when you're done. You could consider my request your fee for your lessons. Very well. I look forward to seeing the results. How does the weather look at the moment? Still raining? I can tell the temperature has dropped considerably. With enough luck, the rain will stop soon, or getting wet ears will be all the more unpleasant. No? You're offering your coat? Are you so valiant with everyone you know? Or do I get special treatment? Regardless, I appreciate the gesture. Although you needn't worry about my health, I'm not the type to catch cold that often. In fact, I would say you look colder than I at the moment. At the very least, you look far less at ease than normal. There's something that is bothering you, is there not? You make it quite evident in your expression, dear Outlander. Yes. Yes, it is a change from what I'm used to. The way you carry yourself is very different from that of the people I usually interact with. Much of my conversation with others are either involved with politics or my work at the shrine or the publishing house. Most people are, well, they have many reasons to hide their true intentions, disguise their emotions under sweet talk and clever words. You, on the other hand, have no reason to hide your thoughts around me, and thus never do so. It is refreshing, to say the least, and much less tiring than the company of most others. So, what is it on your mind? Tell me what bothers you so. Ah, I see. I understand why you would feel ill at ease in regards to her well-being, especially as of late. However, I wouldn't say that's something we have to concern ourselves with. It is very unlikely that this weather is a result of Faye's doing. It's a rather mild storm, especially compared to what would happen if she got into a strong enough mood swing that she would have such little control over her abilities. You would be correct. It's most likely an ordinary storm, one created by the forces of nature, one that is ultimately mundane. A may have the ability to influence changes in the weather. The endless hurricane that once surrounded Inazuma is one such example. However, if she does not actively interfere with the weather, nature will simply take its course. And that is to say, she can create storms, but not all storms are created by her. Pardon me, but I did think of a rather amusing story. It's about A's power over the weather. If we're to wait here for much longer, we might as well entertain ourselves in the meantime while we wait for the rain to stop. It's a story that I know she would never want me to repeat, but unlike many stories of the Archons that I remember, this one has an uplifting ending. There are far too few stories like that, in that regard. You're curious, are you not? Yes, I can tell. I can tell quite easily. Well, this story I speak of happened quite a long time ago. Many centuries ago, in fact, when her sister was still alive. I assure you, this story does have a happy ending. First, you ought to know that A has not always had such control over her powers. She developed a precise, deadly mastery of her abilities through years of strict training and developing a certain mental fortitude. Oh, she was still as focused and duty-bound as ever, but at the time she hadn't had the years needed to gain complete control. When this story began, the twins had taken one of many trips to the nation of Geo to meet with the rest of the Archons. They would gather, share stories and information, and offer advice to their fellow gods. A would accompany her sister, and she would often drag me along with her when she had to visit Yae. Makoto met with the Archons as usual, while A guarded her from the shadows, in the event that she needed to defend her sister from an unknown threat. However, on this particular day, there is no true threat, but instead, an unexpected visitor. At one point during a meeting, a small red ferret jumped off a nearby pile of amber and onto A's shoulder and clung onto her clothing. I might have wanted some food. Or perhaps I recognized her as one who was kinder to animals than most. Or perhaps it saw the way my fox form sat in her lap, and it was jealous of how she was petting my ears. Who's to say? But, either way, the end result was the same. A ferret suddenly jumped onto her, and A was understandably taken by surprise. However, in her startled response, A accidentally created a small lightning bolt that ended up singeing the hair of the Hydra Archon. Yes, there was quite a fiasco in the aftermath. Makoto had to leap more than a few logical hoops to explain why such a thing happened. And all the while, the animal Archon chortled and laughed at the entire situation, as if it were a stage comedy put on just for him. Yes, the animal Archon Barbados. You're acquainted with him? I had figured as much. I very much doubted that A was the first Archon you've met. And any others? You know Morax. That would make sense. When I mentioned the fate of the Geo Archon, you had the most curious expression at the time. Almost as if you knew the truth contradicted my statement. I suppose that will be you a story to tell, if you ever so wish it. The Archons of Animo and Geo. I remember them quite well. The Animo Archon always did have a knack for telling stories. He would bring the small lyre that shone in the amber light of the setting sun, and he would sing while regaling us with his latest tales. He would sing of the triumphs of the little mortals below, or of the beauty and splendor of the Archon's nations, or of the way Morax had tripped over the roots of a dendro slime that morning, all with the same elegance and grandeur he always displayed. Meanwhile, Morax's method of storytelling was much more subtle. He was extremely straightforward, relaying history and current events as if he were a mere observer, rather than an active party in the affairs of the nations. And yet, we could always sense some form of emotion, perhaps sentimentality, hidden in his words. Oh, he hid them very well. But sometimes he would look over at the rest of the Archons, almost as if he were assuring himself that everyone was still there. And for a single solitary moment when that happened, he looked content. Happy? Yes, I think Morax felt happy on those rare occasions. I looked happy? I suppose I am happy, telling their stories. I've never been able to tell these stories to anyone in the years since they happened. You're more perceptive than I thought. It has been a long time, an extremely long time, since I was the last able to talk about the peaceful times of the Archons. A doesn't enjoy hearing those stories. They inevitably dredge up more unpleasant memories of hers by association. However, I believe it's best to remember them. Even the most mundane of stories carries meaning, sometimes exactly because they're ordinary, yet comforting. Perhaps in a sense it is easier for me to speak on such things than it is for someone like A. But then again, it was always my job to keep a level head for the sake of my Archon. And I think that any meaningful story deserves to be retold, to remind the world of their existence. Yes, that is why I opened my publishing house. Even if it was centuries ago that I established the Yae Publishing House, my reason for doing so is still crystal clear. More and more stories will live on, even long after their creators have passed. And I know A would never want me speaking on such things, but There is no way to guarantee that I will survive the test of time. Should the time ever come when I too have passed, I hope to be remembered. I yearn to be remembered. In a sense, by creating stories for the world to hear, I have built my own form of eternity. Do you hear that? Yes, I believe the rain has mostly cleared up. It should stop any minute now. So, tell me, traveler, did you expect our conversation to go in that direction? No? I have to admit, I'm pleased I can still surprise you at times. Then, if you would like, I would very much like to go on another outing with you when I have a day off from my work. Or if you could stop by the shrine every now and then, I suppose I could entertain you. Would you like to hear more of my stories? Oh, any story really. As long as you would be willing to listen to them, that is. Oh, I would very much like to tell you more about my stories. Luckily for you, they're fresh in my mind. When she returned to us, I ran A through a brief summary of the centuries of history she's missed. But there are some parts of that history I have not told anyone yet. And I suppose you shall be the first. Good. Good. Speaking honestly, I'm happy to hear that. Then, I expect to see you soon, traveler.